live. I'm live now. Hello again. I am live again. I'm going to do my normal thing. I'm going to wait until LinkedIn knows that I'm live and wait until you know that I'm live before I actually bring Sarah onto screen. I'm going to be talking to Sarah Evans from Cardea Lettings here in Oxfordshire. We're going to talk about all things lettings. We are going to talk about what Sarah does differently because of what she's learnt over the years, and we're going to talk about some of the pitfalls that property owners and landlords can avoid. If you're watching, because LinkedIn has now told me that I'm here, do me a favour and pop a comment in to let me know that you're watching. If you've got any questions about property ownership, about lettings, about being a landlord, about being an accidental landlord, as I know some of you are, pop your questions in the comments below and we'll answer them. If I'm looking down, it's not that I'm ignoring you folk. What I'm doing my own tech as well in the background, so I'm just doing a couple of things under here to make everything work. There we go. So that's me tagging Sarah. So if you're watching, let me know that you're watching. I'm just going to do the one more tech thing I need to do. And my wingman, the amazing Alex J. Thank you, Alex, for letting us know that we are live, and Alex at least can see and hear us. And good morning to you, Alex. It's lovely to see you again. So I'm going to bring Sarah on the screen. And good morning, Sarah. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Morning, Steph. Sarah, and my business is Cardea Lettings and Management. Launched in November last year. So I've worked in property for now 15 years now. Worked for corporate agents, worked for independent agents, and worked in social housing. And was unfortunately made redundant due to COVID in October last year, so decided it was time to start my own business. And it also means as the boss, I can do things differently and take away all the information I've learned over the last 15 years and try and do it a bit better. I'm sure everybody says that when they start a business, to do it better. But yeah, that's the aim. So the main focus of my agency is to have both tenants and landlords really connected. I think a big issue in the industry is that tenants think landlords are horrible people and landlords think tenants are horrible people. And they're really not. 99% of them are all absolutely fantastic, and it's just really getting that matched pair together. And on the side of that, landlords pay an awful lot of money in management fees for things that they don't always need, especially if they've got an area of business that is connected to property. Maybe they're a maintenance contractor, so they don't need the agency to do the maintenance. So why pay for it in a management fee? So I offer a pick and mix service. So you can pick and choose the aspects of the management service that you need rather than having to pay for everything. So yeah, that's sort of the two USPs, I guess, if you like, for my business.
A really quick, before I respond to all of that, a really quick good morning to Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. We need to catch up, which we will do as soon as life slows down. I've been pretty much flat out since I bumped into you. Good morning, Victoria. You're coming up as private user when I bring your comments on screen. It's just something to do with your LinkedIn security settings. Happens to quite a lot of people, but thank you to the people who are joining us. Just responding to you, Sarah. That's an interesting one. I let for 6 years, sort of in between my marriage splitting up and ultimately moving in with Sharon, and I got on all right with my landlord, but I was at the time dealing with a private landlord who'd been a private landlord since 1985, but it wasn't without its challenges, not least because he'd been a private landlord since 1985. That will age him a little bit, and when I needed him, he was actually quite difficult to get hold of. That sort of thing became a frustration to me. He was a landlord on purpose. He'd built this building as a builder specifically to let it out. I guess you come across quite a lot of accidental landlords as well, people who've either got together with a partner and have got a property to let, or people who become like that, or people who've been sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of turned on, I guess, by Channel 4 programs and think that buying a property and letting it is going to be really easy. Do you come across a lot of people like that as well?
Absolutely. I think it's probably quite a fair split between those that do it as a business and those that are accidental. And I think the big thing for accidental landlords is mindset, and it's about changing their view that it was their family home, or they lived in it, or it was mum's house, and changing that view to being a business. That's where I think a lot of the issues come in, is when you become an accidental landlord. And in the past, I've had landlords whose mum has passed away, and they've then obviously inherited the house and thought, okay, well, I'll rent it out. They don't do any work to it, so it's quite dated. So you get a specific type of tenant then that doesn't particularly want to look after it because it's not, brand new and shiny. And they also have this sort of, oh, well, mum used to cut the apple tree down trim the apple tree every year, and they haven't touched it. There's apples all over the floor. Oh my God, what are they doing? So they don't see it as a business and a transaction. They see it as mum's house, and why aren't they looking after it like mum did? When a tenant phones and says, oh, the boiler's broken. Well, mum lived in there for 70 years and it never broke. And you think, because it's... I think accidental landlords, they're great, fantastic, and they tend to be a little softer with tenants as well. So they'll be a little bit more relaxed with what tenants can do in properties, be it decorating or updating or changing the floor. They tend to be a lot more relaxed on that front. But I think it's the big thing they have to get their head around is running it as a business. There are lots of compliance and legalities and regulations involved in it. And if you don't do it correctly, you can get stung quite heavily.
Yeah, I guess it is that thing. If you've got an emotional attachment to something, particularly a property, I guess that emotional attachment remains there. Is that one of the things that leaves landlord and tenant feeling like they don't like each other, or feeling like the other one's trying to get something over on them? Is that one of the things you think that sort of leads to that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially with single let properties, so rather than sharing or student lets, if it's like a single property with a family living in it, when you get a family in a property, they tend to want to treat it as a home, because that's what it is. It's their home, and ideally for a longer period of time. And sometimes you'll find with accidental landlords, because it was mum's property or because it was dad's property, they'll drive past quite regularly. And they'll go, oh, they haven't trimmed the front bush, or there's weeds growing by the front door. And as you know, Steph, life takes over. Sometimes you don't get to do the weeding in the front garden every week. And I think sometimes tenants feel that they're being overly watched, and that, they're not being left to just get on with it. Whereas if you're a business landlord, I don't think business landlords ever go to their properties if they don't have to. They just sort of let the tenants get on with it. And when the tenant reports an issue, then they'll fix it. So yeah, there's two very different levels between the two types of landlords.
Yeah. Have you been driving past my house? Because you're just mentioning front gardens which haven't been weeded. That's one of the jobs I haven't got round to for the last couple of weeks. To be fair, to be absolutely fair, I think the dandelions have just come out in a rush. I think they weren't there yesterday and now they're there. Or I've just been a bit lazy or busy. So if someone isn't an accidental landlord, if someone's actively looking at going into this as a business, if they've been tempted by all of the stuff on Channel 4, Channel 5, that sort of thing, what sort of things should people be paying attention to in the first place? How should people be preparing themselves, I guess, for being a landlord as a business?
I think probably one of the most important things, and funnily enough, it was someone mentioned it last night at a networking event, that I think a lot of property investors see themselves as property investors. And a lot of them have limited companies in order to obviously make the most out of tax efficiency, etc. But what they don't see is that as a business, you can only be a business if you sell something. You have to sell something, a client has to buy it. That's how a business works. And what I think landlords sometimes forget is that they are a business and they're selling accommodation, which is one of the most important things in a person's life. It's their home, it's where they live. So you have to provide a certain level of accommodation, otherwise you don't sell anything and therefore your business is null and void. So the most important thing, I think, when a landlord's looking to, or a property investor's looking to get into property, is, like Kirsty Alsop says, location, location, location. It depends what you're looking for. If you're looking for a HMO, don't buy a property on Woodstock Road in Oxford. You're not going to get very far there. They're nice big family houses that you would rent single let for a lot of money. But you wouldn't put a HMO there. It doesn't really work. And vice versa, you don't want to buy a property in a row of terraces and try and convert it into a 5-bed detached family home. It's weighing up those different aspects of location. What is it that you're looking for? Are you looking for immediate cash flow? In which case you're looking at a property that may be a repossession, might be below market value, that you can rent out straight away and get some good cash flow coming in. Or are you looking for a long-term goal? Maybe you're looking for retirement funds. Then not necessarily you're going to make a lot of money every month. You would possibly buy a more expensive property, which is going to have a much bigger capital growth over, say, 10, 15, 20 years. And you're then going to sell that and walk away with the capital rather than gaining money every month. So you really need to know why you're doing it and what it is you want to achieve out of it before you even start looking at properties. That's the fun bit, isn't it? You go and you view 20 properties and you're like, oh, these are nice. But you need to know why you're doing it, what your financial outcome is going to be, so that you can pick and choose the right ones that fit your goals. And secondly, it's got to be a business. You can't go into a house and go, oh, this is lovely. I could imagine myself. Oh, yeah, you could put No, it is a business. Can this rent out? What size are the rooms? Does it have outside space? Does it have parking? If it's a family home, is there space for 2 cars? It's all the logistics that go with it, and making sure that if you ran it as a business, and you had, money coming in and money going out, because there will be maintenance, there will be bills, there will be insurances, and you've got to make sure that those finances stack. Otherwise, you just end up in a hole.
No, that makes sense. I'm going to answer some of that in a second. Actually, one of the things I'm going to say, Alex is just asking a question, which I'll come to in a second. But if you've just started watching this, I'm speaking to Sarah Evans from Cardea Lettings in Oxfordshire. And I was an estate agent for 20 years. I used to sell houses. So if you've got any questions about property investment, about being a landlord, about what you should look out for, about anything around property, do pop your question in the comments below, and I'll bring the question up and we'll answer it. This is from Alex J from the Friday Collective, and Alex builds apps and builds things in the metaverse, and him and the Friday Collective build software that solves problems. So his question is related to that. If there was a single piece of software that could solve the disconnect between landlords and tenants, what would you see that being, or how would you see it working? And Alex has wanted to solve that for a long time. Do you think it is something that could be solved with a piece of software? I mean, the sort of thing that I'm thinking about, to throw my thought in first, is that I found my landlord really difficult to get hold of. He didn't do email, and so we just had one landline phone number for him. If there was a way of sort of streamlining that communication between landlord and tenant with software or with an app, do you think that would make the whole process better, Sarah?
Oh, 100%. There are quite a few property management systems that have what they call like a chat function included, and I think that really is the way forward. Similarly to WhatsApp, but a little bit more business-like, if you like, because if you do WhatsApp, they'll message you at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning for silly things. But it's definitely having that instant chat function and being able to see that, have landlords read your message? Have they definitely received it? And maybe having it so that you send a message out and it goes to the agent, the landlord's maintenance guy, whatever it is, whoever's involved in that deal, to all be contacted at the same time. So many people now are using technology, and it's so much easier. We rarely pick up the phone anymore. It's all typey and sending messages. A piece of software or an app that would just be able to communicate. And I think for HMOs in particular, that software is missing. When you've got a house share of 5 or 6 people, they'll have a WhatsApp chat between them, and then they'll obviously talk about who's putting the bins out and all that sort of stuff. But then there's no sort of connect link with the landlord unless the landlord joins that WhatsApp chat, which becomes very dangerous. So I think that is missing somewhere, for a piece of software that has that sort of chat function where you can just immediately reply with any questions or queries.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about this as you're talking about it as well. I've just with everything, if in my flat my toilet was leaking, and I couldn't get hold of him, and it just that ended up making me more and more anxious. So if I just knew that a managing agent or landlord had seen that message and was acting on it, and actually we've seen it, Steph, and it's going to be done Thursday, that would have taken a lot of that anxiety away, just to know it was being dealt with rather than have that frustration. So I hope that answers part of the question, Alex. I think that immediately struck me that would really help. And as you say, yeah, put everything into an inbox for the landlord so they weren't getting random messages at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because my son and my stepson are both chefs, so they exist in the middle of the night because they finish work at midnight, 1 o'clock. So that's when they tend to do stuff. But as you say, you don't necessarily want to get WhatsApp messages there. I'm going to bring something else on screen really quickly just to say that I'm talking live to Sarah Evans from Cardea Lettings. If you've got any questions for Sarah about property management, property lettings, property investment, then do drop them in the comments and we'd love to answer them. If you're not already connected with Sarah, please do. I met Sarah at a networking event here in Oxfordshire. We've been connected ever since. We have managed in the last 2 months spectacularly not to meet up, even though we live about 5 miles from each other, despite plans. But we are going to meet up real soon. We're doing this one virtually. I'm just going to bring up another question which we've got, again from Alex. Yeah, the ability to book services, communicate in real time, and gather data at the appropriate times is a necessity, then, says Alex. I think it's a bit it's a bit like an ERP, isn't it? It's a bit that sort of software, Alex, that you can allocate resources, that you know what's going on, that things like when tradespeople are coming out can be communicated back. And Alex said, and actually, Sarah was sort of having a three-way conversation here. Alex is also a member of Connect. You've more often seen Nadia, Alex's wife, but Alex is a member of Connect himself. So you folks should have a one-to-one, because he'd love to get a proper idea of the sort of needs that could be involved in this type of system. I think that would be an exciting conversation to have going forward. So grab a one-to-one with Alex when you can. If anyone else has got anything to ask, please drop them in the comments below. Apart from the, what's the word I'm looking for, what we were talking about just now, the emotional attachment to a property which has become a business, the sort of issues that I used to see people making, because I was an estate agent for 20 years. In the latter part of my estate agency career, we saw the buy-to-let market really become a thing from the sort of mid-1990s onwards. A couple of issues that I saw people make were completely misunderstanding that flats, for example, may come with extra costs over and above the mortgage payments. I had to sell at least one flat that someone had bought thinking that they were going to let it and hadn't added management and maintenance fees into their calculations at all. So people not calculating everything. Maintenance was another one. People not leaving themselves any wiggle room for maintenance. One of the things that you've mentioned was interesting, because people would often misunderstand how repossessions worked. And actually, with a repossessed property, you typically have to keep it on the market until exchange of contracts, and you have to advertise in the local paper and invite other people to make higher offers. So that sometimes frustrated landlords. The sellers of repossessions stick to the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. Apart from not calculating for everything and that sort of thing. Are there any other pitfalls that you see potential landlords, potential property investors falling into, Sarah?
I think for new investors, the biggest pitfall is regulation and compliance. As you said, people see it on Channel 4 and think it's easy to rent out a property. There are 172 different pieces of legislation that apply to the lettings, private rented sector. And you speak to any landlord, and they can probably guarantee you they won't be able to name more than maybe 8. Which is great. That's 8 that they know. But what about the other 160 something? Maths is never my strong point. So that they know about gas safety. Yeah, I know I've got to have a gas safety check done. I know I've got to have smoke detectors installed. But do they know about right to rent checks? And that they've got to check non-UK resident IDs every 12 months. Are they doing inspections regularly? And people go, oh yeah, but I went 6 months ago and the property was immaculate. Which is great, you've got a great tenant on your hands, but did you check the tenants that were in the property were the tenants that have rented the property? Was there anybody additional there? Because if there is and the Home Office find out, that's your neck on the line, not the tenant. And all these different things, health and safety regulations, and making sure that you are registered with ICO. Most landlords don't register with ICO, but they're holding data. And under GDPR, they need to be registered with ICO. So there's so many different things that they think, oh, this is easy. And 9 times out of 10, it is quite simple. As long as you've got a strict process in place for following all the regulations, it's quite easy until you do it wrong. And they're forever in the news, landlords being fined thousands and thousands of pounds. Recently there was a HMO landlord in London who was fined £150,000 by the council because he had 5 HMOs that weren't licensed. And he just thought, I'll just save myself the £600 a year, I'll just not bother with that. And on the other side of that, not only did he get fined £150,000, the tenants can apply for a rent repayment order for 12 months of rent. So he had 5 HMOs, all 6 beds, all 6 tenants in each property, claimed a rent repayment order for 12 months rent. I mean, that just wiped him out. He had to sell everything. And yes, that's a worst case scenario, but it does happen. A landlord was fined the other day in Coventry, first one for not having any ICR done, £1,600. Well, that's probably 4 or 5 months' rent if you think of the margin on the monthly rent. So it can be quite scary when you're not doing it correctly. And tenants are becoming far more aware of what their rights and legislation are because they Google it. Or they'll go onto a Facebook group and say, this is what my landlord's doing. And some professional will come along and go, well, that's illegal. You can't do that. You need to do this. You need to do that. And so I think landlords are in a very sticky situation at the minute. And as a first-time landlord, they go, oh, well, I've got the time. I'll manage it myself. And my question is always, name me the 172 pieces of legislation you have to abide by. If you can do that, you can manage it yourself.
I think I've watched some stuff on various YouTube channels recently where people are actively giving advice on various matters like being a tenant of a property and so on. And I imagine for local authorities as well that it's actually HMOs particularly are probably quite an easy target for them, and also quite visible in the neighbourhood as well. If there's an HMO in the neighbourhood, it may be that's something that, if not managed right, neighbours are possibly complaining about, which makes it quite visible to the local authority as well, which, yes, you need to be making sure you're sitting inside the law. Aaron asks a slightly different question. If I were to develop a funnel from properties for rent to property management services, would that have a quantifiable value? I've got to admit, I'm not completely getting the question, Aaron. Is Sarah understanding exactly what that means?
I guess it depends on which side we're looking at. So one of the funnels that I have is if I have a property available to rent, then I have a funnel where a tenant completes an application form and it sort of takes them through to different pages to get to the end to then book them in for a viewing. And if they don't get to the end, they don't get to view it. So I have that funnel, but I'm not sure if Aaron's meaning the other way around from a landlord perspective, maybe.
If you wouldn't mind qualifying that a little bit, because I think just in just as the questions coming in writing, I'm not completely understanding it, Aaron. So if you wouldn't mind popping that in a slightly different way so that we can understand it, we'll keep talking, and I'll bring your question back up on screen when I see it again. What else? What else should landlords consider? I think there's an awful lot that I'm asking you about that. What else should landlords consider before going into this, or even if they are a landlord already, what should people be considering?
I guess, yeah, the regulation, that what their goal is are probably the most important. I guess the other thing is like you said before, not having that personal emotional attachment to it. So not furnishing or decorating the property to in the way you like it. For single lets especially, I mean, you can see my house, I'm a rented house, white walls. It's pretty plain and simple, but it works because it goes with anybody's furniture. When you move into a house and it's got a pink carpet and a blue wall, and you think, oh dear, no. Yeah. You get a different type of tenant, maybe not so professional. But then on the other side of that, so there is two sides. If you're doing single lets, very plain, neutral, great. If you're doing HMOs, sharers, because they just have a room and they just maybe they maybe don't even have any furniture, they've come along with a suitcase, they want everything there to be really fashionable, really on trend. So you'll see now that HMOs are starting to be developed with like green grass walls, for example, or wood paneling, and it's all very modern and on trend, because that's what they want, and they'll pay a premium for that, rather than a magnolia room with a pine bed kind of thing. So yeah, there's two different sides, but definitely look at depending on what your goal is and what property it is, how you furnish and decorate it. You don't want to be putting in cheap B&Q kitchens anymore, which is what used to happen. You'd get a cheap B&Q kitchen, it would fall apart and you'd end up fixing it for the next 10 years. But again, on the other side, you don't want to spend 30 grand on a bespoke kitchen. We're talking middle range now. People will look after it better, and you'll have less maintenance costs, which is obviously always a good thing.
And as I'm speaking from Whitney, if there's anyone from B&Q watching, we were using you as an example.
Sorry.
And as I know one of the kitchen guys in B&Q, I live in Whitney. Let's not use B&Q as an example. My son actually used to work there. Other kitchens are available,
but they do have some flat pack ones that get a kitchen out.
No, I absolutely know that. So as let's bring this up on screen for a second. Okay, let's have a look at Aaron's question. I beg your pardon, Aaron. Let's have a look at Aaron's question. Yeah, I mean, Aaron's asking, he has access to 250 plus landlords. He could potentially form a connection between them and a property management service. Is that a financially viable thing to do? That sounds to me like actually being a letting agent, Aaron. So that's what that sounds like to me. I was an estate agent for 20 years. We were, our connection was that we had the mailing list back in the day of people who wanted to buy a house in Whitney. So if you had a house to sell in Whitney, I might have 10 or 12 people who wanted to buy it. So it sounds to me like, Sarah will have a view on this as well, like being that connection between them and a property management service. Sounds like you're starting to become a lettings agent there, because most lettings agents would have a property findings, a tenant finding service, I guess. So I can imagine that a property management service may actually pay you a commission on that. Do you think that would make sense to you as well, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. As things have progressed over the last sort of 20, 30 years, letting agency have changed an awful lot. And you'll find that a lot of agencies now outsource the property management side. You'll have a letting agent take myself, for example, and I will deal with the landlords and get the properties on board and then start renting them out. And then I could potentially outsource the entire property management to a white label company, who will manage the gas checks, any maintenance, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would say that if you've got that connection of those landlords, you really are the letting agent, because that's what I've got. A list of landlords that I periodically contact, see if they need any help with anything. I do the management myself because that's what I've done previously. But yeah, a lot of agencies now would outsource that. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, Stefan.
And I also think what would make a ton of sense, Aaron, you're based up in the northwest, Sarah's based down here in Oxfordshire, but perhaps you two should actually message each other, because Sarah is a property management service, and if you've got access to all of those landlords, it would make sense for you to talk. And by the way, I trust both of you, love both of you, so you would be great people to be put in contact. Someone else who I love, who is watching us from Sydney, Australia, is Ed Zia. So Edward, awesome Edward Zia, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in. What on earth time is it out there? Is it 9:30 at night, 10:30 at night? But yeah, thank you for tuning in, Ed. We always appreciate you coming up on board. If anyone else has got any questions about lettings, about buying a property as well, because I can pitch in a point of view on that. From my 20 years in estate agency experience, if you've got any questions about any of that, pop them in the comments below. I am speaking to, let's bring that up on screen, I'm speaking to Sarah Evans from Cardea Lettings. Cardea Lettings up there. Let's put my cursor there so you can see it. So if you're not already connected with Sarah, that's her website for properties in Oxfordshire. That's where you will find Sarah on LinkedIn. So do go and connect with her as well. It is 8:30 at night where Edward Zia is, and he's choosing to watch us. So anyone else who's joined in, thank you very much, and thanks for, as always, the commitment, Edward, who loves the deep dives, which I'm doing with Connect members. Edward was part of the inspiration which led to me actually forming Connect. Edward I've spoken to for years, so thank you, and he loves the deep dives. I'm loving talking to Sarah this morning. What about the area that we're based in, Sarah? The Oxfordshire area generally. I believe for all sorts of reasons this is a really good area for people to invest in property, for people to look at property. We've still got some areas which can be really good value. We've got really decent access to London. We've got a ton of industry out here, and also for holiday lets, we've got the Cotswolds as well. So all of those must make this a really good area for property investment.
100%. Oxfordshire is a great area. You've got Oxford City with the universities and the hospitals. So HMOs are rife there for obvious reasons, and serviced accommodation. And like you say, coming out this way, I know quite a few landlords in the Witney, Burford areas with serviced accommodation, because it's great, right on the gateway to the Cotswolds. And you've now got places like Bicester and Didcot, because the transport links have massively improved. So obviously now you've got Bicester Parkway. It's Bicester Parkway, isn't it? I'm trying to remember what it's called. That runs direct now into Oxford, and then straight onto London, and Didcot obviously straight to London. They're really, really up and coming areas now. The rental values are a little bit lower than the rest of Oxfordshire, but the property prices are less than the rest of Oxfordshire. So yeah, there's definite room for growth in both Didcot and Bicester. The only downside to Oxfordshire is the price. We're the third most expensive county in the entire country. So it's you have to have money behind you to be able to start property investing in Oxfordshire, which is why we tend to find more portfolio landlords in Oxfordshire. They'll have started maybe up north, Hull, Sheffield, Liverpool, bought a couple of properties at the lower price bracket, got their feet under the table with managing them, and then sold those and moved further down south to where they live. But yeah, it's the prices here are quite high.
I mean, random fact, and I can't even remember how I know this, but I do. But the John Radcliffe Hospital, a part of Oxford University Hospitals, the teaching hospital in the middle of Oxford, has 13,000 staff there. So I very much imagine around Headington and that part of Oxford there are loads of HMOs and filled with people. Do you need to answer the front door? Was that your front
No,
door or
it's
mine?
fine.
I couldn't tell which one it was. It could be a delivery at this end, but we've got John Radcliffe Hospital, 13,000 people. We've obviously still got BMW Mini in Oxford.
Yeah.
Out here in West Oxfordshire, we've got RAF Bryce Norton, and I understand that quite a lot of people don't actually live full time in Oxfordshire if they're stationed at Bryce. So I know there's quite a lot of landlords who benefit from that, and tenants who benefit from coming to Oxfordshire for the period that they're stationed at Bryce as well. So there's all of those things going on in Oxford as well as the transport links as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I'm now living in Minster, but was living in Carston, and the MOD knocked down quite a lot of the houses over the
Yeah.
last few years, and obviously, Lynham closed and moved to us here at Bryce. And you tend to find there's quite an even split at Bryce Norton as to whether they live in MOD accommodation or they're actually landlords. So they will buy a house here while they're stationed here, for example. And then when they get stationed somewhere else, they'll rent the one out that's here. And they do that all over the place. So they've got random houses near RAF bases throughout the country, which is what my father-in-law did. And they end up then with a portfolio of properties that they have at some point lived in, but then rented out because they've been posted off somewhere else. So quite a few landlords in the area are based at Bryce, or have been in the past.
I never realised that, even though I've lived in Oxfordshire all my life and lived in West Oxfordshire since 1980 or 1981.
Yeah.
Mum and Dad can answer exactly when that was, but 1980 or 1981, something like that. At the top of the conversation, you told us a couple of the USPs of you and of Cardea Lettings.
Yeah.
Just going to give you the opportunity for a bit of a commercial break. What makes Cardea different? What makes Sarah Evans different? What makes it different for a landlord dealing with you and Cardea particularly?
I think I'm not a heavy salesperson. I never have been. I've worked in the property management side. So for me, it's about being straight with landlords. There's no airs and graces with me. I won't sit there and say, oh, yeah, you can get X amount of money for your property just to get the property on the books. If it's in a really poor state, I'll tell you it's in a really poor state and that you won't get any tenants for it and you need to spend some money on it, and that's that. I'm very blunt, if you like, and to the point, which obviously works for some people, not for others. And I am also very much 50-50 tenants and landlords. So I know there are a number of agents out there that will support the landlord 100% and, do naughty things to tenants because the landlord pays the bills, which they do. However, if you don't have a tenant, the landlord can't pay the bill. So my argument has always been you need to treat them fairly. And if a landlord's not treating a tenant fairly, then I will step in and say, that's not how you do it. This is the right way. And vice versa. If you've got a tenant that's obviously abusing a landlord, again, I will be quite straight with them and have that conversation. The reason I'm really passionate about it is I want to make that change. I want the lettings industry to be seen as a much higher quality industry. We're not very trusted at the minute. We're like the 5th most untrusted industry in the country, which is quite sad. Whereas you look at the United States and it's the 2nd most professional industry. And I think that's where we need to get to in the UK. And that's what I'm pushing for, is to make it fairer for both tenants and landlords across the board.
I think that's a brilliant quest to go on. I was an estate agent for 20 years. I've mentioned that so many times today. And yeah, I know that thing that actually very often they provide an amazing service and they're still not trusted by the public, partly because of the media coverage of them as well. So that's a brilliant quest. We were talking about Oxford and we were talking about Woodstock Road, and Edward's ear says that, wow, I live in Sydney and a dog box costs hundreds of thousands. We talked about the Woodstock Road in Oxford head, you wouldn't get much change from a million, I imagine, even for a kennel on the Woodstock Road in Oxford. Next time you're over in the UK, I'm going to take you to the Woodstock Road and the Banbury Road in Oxford and show you around Oxford, Edward. I have been talking today to Sarah Evans. If you're not connected with Sarah from Cardea Lettings, please go and find her. If you've been watching this and you'd like to have a chat with her about anything, Aaron and Sarah, I really think you should connect and have a conversation. Alex, you are in Connect along with Sarah anyway, so please do connect with her and have that conversation about an app that could work, that could make lettings agents and managing agents, more transparent. I think that would be a brilliant thing. But anyone else who's been watching, do go and connect with Sarah and check out her business, Cardea Lettings, as well. Any final points that you want to drop in before we wrap up for the morning, Sarah?
No, other than for the month of April, I am running an offer where I will give you 12 months of fully managed service for £600, irrelevant of the rent of the property, £600 flat for 12 months. So yeah, if anybody is interested in taking me up on that offer, it's only valid for April, so another 10 days. And yeah, you can have it for 600.
Aaron, I strongly suggest you get in touch with Sarah. That sounds like an amazing offer. I know we only live up the road from each other. You've been moving house. I've had various things going on, as you know. We really must get together for an actual coffee sometime. And I think, I don't know if you watched what me and Sally Green did last week, but we should get together for a coffee, set up the camera and actually have our coffee chat live with the people on LinkedIn as well, because I think that would work brilliantly. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for joining me this morning, Sarah.
Excellent.
I will speak to you very soon. Thanks to everyone else who's joined us as well. Thanks for all the questions. Edward, thank you for joining us from Sydney. I totally appreciate it. Thank you. I will be back live with some other members of Connect who I'll be talking to over the next few weeks. All of the recordings of these are out there. If you're watching on replay, still ask any questions that you've got. Sarah will be along to answer them. I've tagged Sarah and I'll keep an eye on any comments that come in after we finish recording. But thank you